Hey guys, today we'll be taking a look at the latest polls that have been released for the 2022 gubernatorial elections, and more specifically, the competitive races this November. And so in the month of May, we have seen more polls come out for these 2022 governor elections than any single month prior to this. And so that is why in this video, I'm going to take a look at how the most competitive races are playing out for this November. So just looking at these polls right now, the Democratic Party and the Republicans both have a very good chance at expanding the number of governorships they hold. Currently, the Democratic Party holds 22 governorships after the 2021 governor elections, in which they lost Virginia to Glenn Youngkin. The Republicans currently hold 28. If you go back to 2018, of course, Democrats won 23, Republicans 27. But 2018 was a very good year for the Democratic Party. If you go back just 1 year after the 2017 elections, the Democrats held 16 governorships. So in 2018, they were able to flip 7 governorships, and this really was a very big deal for the Democratic Party, as this, the performance that they had in 2014 was absolutely terrible after 6 years of Barack Obama. And so the last time the Democratic Party had more governorships was all the way back in 2009, even after they lost both Virginia and New Jersey. So 2009 was the last time the Democratic Party held more governors. It has been 13 years since then, and in 2022, I think it is very unlikely that the Democrats actually win more governorships than the Republicans, even though they would really only have to win a net 4 seats, but that really is very difficult. Not seats, I mean governorships. But if you look at the map, we have 36 races, and most of these races really are not going to be too competitive. Many of them, you're just going to see the incumbent governors winning their re-elections, or the incumbent parties, whoever they choose to nominate if the governor is term limited or not running for re-election. So on the Democratic side, with the solid and likely states filled in, they currently have 19 governorships, and for the Republicans, there is going to be a few more. So the Republican Party just outright starts off with a little bit of an advantage in the states of Texas and Florida. I don't think these two races are going to be too competitive. Greg Abbott is going to defeat Beto O'Rourke, and Ron DeSantis is probably going to win in Florida as well. I don't think these races are going to be too interesting, even though, in Texas, Beto O'Rourke is a very notable candidate. It is still 2022, and the political environment is really favoring the Republican Party at this point in time. In both the states of Vermont and New Hampshire, I have them going for the Republicans, so 18 actually for the Democrats. Vermont is going to be solid for the Republicans, as Phil Scott and Kristen Sununu in New Hampshire are both running for their re-elections in 2022. And I also have the states of Iowa and Ohio with Kim Reynolds and Mike DeWine, who just recently won his renomination, even though he faced a tough primary challenge. So this will give the Republicans 24 governorships and the Democrats 18. So the Republicans really only need to win 2 more if they want to continue holding on to more governorships. And in terms of which governors belong to which party, in terms of the incumbents in these states, in Nevada you have a Democrat in Steve Sisolak. In Arizona, Doug Ducey, the Republican, who will not be running for re-election because he is term limited. Kansas, you actually have a Democrat, Laura Kelly. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all Democrats, but in Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf cannot run for re-election as he is term limited. Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan and Tony Evers in Wisconsin, of course. In the state of Maine, Janet Mills is the Democratic incumbent, and in the state of Georgia, of course, it is Brian Kemp, who just recently won his renomination as well. So looking at the latest polls in the state of Nevada right now, Steve Sisolak is going to face a pretty tough challenge in this November. If you look at the race here, of course, Steve Sisolak is going to win his renomination, while on the Republican side, Joe Lombardo is the clear frontrunner in this race, and he is very likely to win this nomination. So in the end, if you do look at the polls between Sisolak and Lombardo, currently it is a pretty even spread, although I do think that Steve Sisolak is still slightly in a good position to win his re-election. He is polling very well against every other candidate besides Joe Lombardo, and the latest polls do show Steve Sisolak ahead by 9 points. And so no matter what, Steve Sisolak is going to be in a very tight race. race, but I do think that he is clearly in a better position than Catherine Cortez Masto, who is running for her re-election in the U.S. Senate this November as well. So as of right now, I would categorize the state of Nevada as being tilt for the Democratic Party. I do think that they have a very slight advantage. The incumbency factor is going to help Steve Sisolak, and so that is why right now I do think the Democratic Party will be able to very slightly retain the state of Nevada. While in the state of Arizona, we're going to have, I think, a much more exciting race. Of course, the incumbent is Doug Ducey, who will not be running for re-election as he has already served 2 terms. On the Republican side, the current frontrunner is Kari Lake, and on the Democratic side, the current frontrunner is, of course, Katie Hobbs, the Secretary of State. And so I do think that Katie Hobbs is the better candidate in this race. She is much more to the center than Kari Lake. She is also polling better than Kari Lake. If you look at the latest polls that have been released, Katie Hobbs has been polling relatively well. There's only one poll in which she does not lead in, and that is one from February. The latest polls do show Katie Hobbs up 5 points. However, this is a poll funded by the Hobbs campaign. So as of right now, I do think that just like in Nevada, the Democratic Party does have a slight advantage. However, this is a bigger deal as, of course, the governorship is currently held by Republican Doug Ducey. So this would actually be a loss for the Republican Party. And so that is why I will categorize the state of Arizona as a flip for the Democratic Party, also with a tilt categorization. Now, before I go any further, to make sure you join my Discord server if you have not. The link is at the very top of the description below, where you can stay updated on all of the 2024 elections. I also have channel memberships for just 99 cents a month, so make sure you consider getting one of those if you're interested in being more caught up with the elections that we have later this year, as well as in 2024. So moving on to the state of Kansas, I think this is the most vulnerable Democrat in the governor's mansions as of right now. Laura Kelly, the Democratic incumbent, is going to face a very strong challenge from the Republicans in 2018. She very famously defeated Chris Kobach, who was a horrible candidate, but in 2022 against Derek Schmidt, who is much more moderate, Laura Kelly is going to struggle. If you look at the Republican primary, Derek Schmidt is the only candidate still currently in the race, so we already have our presumptive nominees, and if you look at the polling between Laura Kelly and Derek Schmidt, you will see that Schmidt currently does have a very slight advantage. However, the 2 latest polls have both been funded by Emily's List on the Democratic side, while on the Republican side, it is actually funded by Chris Kobach. So, these 2 polls really are going to give either party the advantage. However, this poll from September does favor Derek Schmidt, and I do think that obviously this is the state of Kansas, and because of the fact that Schmidt is not a horrible candidate, he will be at a very obvious advantage going into this race, even though Laura Kelly is the incumbent. She is not terribly unpopular, but she is not terribly popular either, so I don't think that she really does have that strong of a chance in terms of winning her re-election. I think that as of right now, this will actually be a lean categorization in favor of the Republicans. I do think that Derek Schmidt will be able to flip this governorship unless something really drastic happens, but Laura Kelly got very lucky in 2018 running against Chris Kobach. It's just not going to happen again this time. I think that with the national environment just favoring the Republican Party in 2018, of course, you have to remember that it was after 2 years of Donald Trump, and Democrats won back the House with a net gain of over 50 seats or over 40 seats. But in 2022, we're very unlikely to see that. We are probably going to see the exact opposite of that happen this November. So I will give Kansas currently to the GOP. While in the state of Wisconsin, we have another Democratic incumbent. I think that Tony Evers is probably the second most vulnerable Democratic incumbent this November for the Democratic Party. So on the Democratic side, of course, Tony Evers is going to be renominated, while on the Republican side, the primary is still very much in the air. If you look at the latest poll, you will see that Rebecca Kleefisch has led in every single poll that has been released, except for the last one after Tim Mitchell's has joined the race. And Tim Mitchell's is a very rich businessman, and he was also the nominee for the U.S. Senate for the Republican Party in 2004. So he does have a slight political background, although he did, of course, end up losing. But I think that as of right now, Rebecca Kleefisch may actually lose. She is the former lieutenant governor, but this race is still very much in the air as of this point in time. The primary is not in a few months. And so looking at the latest polls in the state of Wisconsin, you'll see that Tony Evers has led in every single poll, or he has not been behind in every single poll, but the latest poll between him and Kleefisch does show an even race. And this was back in August. This was when the Democratic Party was in much better standing. They were basically leading in the generic congressional ballot at this point, and Joe Biden's approval rating was still in the positive. So this really was quite a long time ago, and so that is why these polls are probably not too reliable at all. As you can see, the latest polls were from all the way back in last year, and so Tony Evers, I think, is going to struggle in this race. So I will put it as a tilt for the Republican Party. I do think that the GOP has a very slight advantage going into the state of Wisconsin. In 2022, you also have Ron Johnson running for his re-election, and he is also widely expected to win. So even though the Democratic Party has the incumbency here, I do think that they are still probably going to lose by a very small margin. And on top of that, there is a trend in the state of Wisconsin in which the party of the president, whichever party the president belongs to, that party typically loses the Wisconsin governorship. In 2018, Donald Trump was the president. Tony Evers defeated Scott Walker, who is running for a third term. 2014, of course, Scott Walker won under Barack Obama. 2012, Scott Walker once again. 2010, Scott Walker was elected under Barack Obama. In 2006, under Bush, Jim Doyle. 2002, Jim Doyle as well. 1998, under Bill Clinton, Tommy Thompson. 1994, Tommy Thompson once again. 1990, you of course have Tommy Thompson. This was under George H.W. Bush, so this really was the last time in which the incumbent party in the White House also was able to pick up the Wisconsin gubernatorial election. 1986, you have Tommy Thompson as well. So he was really the last Republican or member of any party to win while the opposite party was in the White House. So I think that this trend is going to harm Tony Evers, just because it's not the trend itself, but just the fact that Wisconsin voters typically are not very happy with how the White House is doing, and so that is why it is going to hurt Tony Evers, because he is affiliated with Joe Biden. So looking at the map right now, the Democrats do have the majority now in terms of governorships, 26 for them right now, 20 for the Democratic Party. Moving on to the state of Michigan, I think that the Democratic Party should be a little bit more optimistic about Michigan. If you look at the election here in 2018, Gretchen Whitmer won by almost 10 points. For a first term, and in 2022 she will be running for re-election, although she has been very unpopular at some points during her tenure. On the Republican side, there is a pretty big primary, and this really is one of the most interesting primary races, I think, for governors in 2022. James Craig, the frontrunner for basically the entirety of the race, will not appear on the ballot. He has said that he will consider doing a write-in campaign, but as of right now, he will not appear on the ballot with his name on it. He might be able to run as a write-in, but that is all he can do. So right now, you have all of these candidates with polling averages less than, 10%. Soldano is really the only one that did not get kicked out, and this is because the Board of Elections in the state of Michigan has said that they did not get enough ballot signatures to appear on the ballot, because Michigan requires that candidates get enough signatures. So James Craig will not even be on the ballot. The last poll that we had was from earlier this month, so we will have to see what happens with new polling in the state of Michigan for the Republican primary, because as of right now, no other candidate really has any significant amount of support. Perry Johnson is also out of the race. Mike Brown is out of the race. So right now, Tudor Dixon, Kevin Rinke, those are really the only candidates that we have left. Ryan Kelly as well, so this will really be a very interesting primary that we have. And if you do look at the polls between Gretchen Whitmer and these candidates, so you do want to ignore James Craig against Tudor Dixon, Whitmer plus 19, against Rinke, Whitmer plus 17. You can go down here in Wikipedia as well. You'll see that Gretchen Whitmer leads by huge margins against the Republicans that are still in this race. Although, of course, in the end, after their nominations, their numbers are going to go up as they are currently relatively unknown. So, and many of these polls are a bit older, from earlier this year or even than last year. So I think that Gretchen Whitmer is still in a very good position, even against James Craig, the strongest Republican candidate, even though he will not be able to appear on the ballot. Whitmer still led in basically all of the latest polls. The last one that Craig led in was all the way back in September, and this was, of course, funded by the Trafalgar Group, who, of course, does favor the GOP, as well as this other one funded by the Michigan Republican Party. So James Craig, in an independent poll, has not led in any single of these polls against Gretchen Whitmer, and I think that Whitmer will do even better against these other candidates. So as of right now, I think that the Democratic Party is in a good position to hold on to the state of Michigan. While in the state of Pennsylvania, we actually have no polls out of Pennsylvania, and we don't even have the candidates yet, even though the primary actually already occurred. Or actually, we do have the candidates. We don't have the candidates for the Senate race because, of course, the race between Amendment Odds and David McCormick is still very much in the air. There will still be a recount, but as of right now, Amendment Odds is supposed to win in the end, but we will really have to just wait a little bit and see. But on the governor's side, Doug Mastriano did end up winning 44% of the vote, much stronger than what was predicted for him. And this really is an issue for the Republican Party. He is a very bad candidate. And on the Democratic side, Josh Shapiro won uncontested, the current Attorney General of Pennsylvania. So the reason why Mastriano is such a bad candidate is because he is on the far right. He did get support from Donald Trump, but the Republican establishment does not support him. And so I think that in a general election scenario, he will end up losing. In 2018, of course, Tom Wolf won with 57% of the vote. He will not be able to run for a third term. So Josh Shapiro, right now, I do have him winning the race. I think that it will still be very tight, but I think that just because Mastriano is such a terrible candidate, Josh Shapiro will be able to come out on top. And up in the state of Maine, we have, I think, another very interesting matchup between Janet Mills, the incumbent governor, and Paul LePage, the former governor who has already served 2 terms as governor of Maine. And so you cannot run for a third consecutive term, but you can run for a third non-consecutive term. That's exactly what Paul LePage is doing, and they're already the presumptive nominees. However, if you do look at the poll, you will see that Janet Mills, as the incumbent Democrat, is leading in the polls. Maine is a state that favors the Democratic Party, and that is clearly shown here, as Janet Mills has led by a pretty significant 4 to 5% margin against the former governor. And so even though Paul LePage is probably one of the best candidates Republicans could put up in this race, Janet Mills right now is still expected to win her re-election, and I will categorize the state of Maine also as being lean for the Democratic Party. And finally, the last race that we have is the state of Georgia. We just saw the primary there. On the Republican side, Brian Kemp easily renominated, defeats David Perdue. On the Democratic side, Stacey Abrams wins uncontested. So looking at the race in the state of Georgia, it is going to be a very tough fight for Stacey Abrams. She really is by far the best candidate Democrats could put up, but Brian Kemp is still a very strong incumbent Republican governor. Even though he defied Donald Trump and Trump endorsed David Perdue, Kemp still won 74% of the vote. He won more votes than Herschel Walker, who was basically a shoo-in for the Republican Party in terms of running for the Senate, and Kemp even faced an even stronger opponent in David Perdue, who was backed by Donald Trump. And Trump even gave Perdue's campaign money, speeches, all of that, and Perdue ended up losing. So Brian Kemp is in a very good position. If you look at 2018, this of course is a rematch of the 2018 race. Kemp was supposed to win by a big margin. He ended up only winning by 1.4%. 2022, the polling is actually worse than what we saw right before the election. Brian Kemp was leading by almost double digits in 2018, but the polling in Georgia is still relatively accurate. They were accurate for the runoff races in Georgia for the Senate, with John Ossoff and Warnock winning, as well as for Joe Biden winning Georgia last November. So if you look at the polls between Kemp and Abrams, Brian Kemp has led in every single poll. Stacey Abrams did lead in some polls going into 2018. And so Brian Kemp right now is in a very good position in terms of winning his re-election. I think that he probably is going to end up winning his re-election just because of the fact that he is now the incumbent. The incumbency will help him. Also, we are in a political environment in which the Republicans are currently favored, and so that all makes it very difficult for Stacey Abrams to come out on top in this race, and so that is why I will categorize the state of Georgia as being lean for the Republicans, and this will give the Republicans 27 governorships, the Democrats 23, so this will be actually a gain of 1 for the Democratic Party. They will be able to flip the state of Arizona as well as in the states of Maryland. Maryland is actually supposed to be solid here, but in the states of Maryland and Massachusetts, you have Republican governors Larry Hogan and Charlie Baker who are not running for re-election. These are very Democratic states, so of course these states will go back to the Democratic side, and that is why the Democrats will have a net gain of 1 as of right now, looking at the polls and just the national environment that we are in. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed joining my Discord server. If you have not, so comment down below which races you are watching and which ones you think are going to be the most interesting this November. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.